Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada,
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya
Jai
Prabhupada, Prabhupada,
Prabhupada, Jaya
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada.
Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai,
Jai,
Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sujeevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna. Siddharth, a lot of people seem to be remaining, huh?
Yes, Prabhuji. I think another probably 5 minutes they'll join. Generally, we see around 7:10 is when more than 40 participants.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. So, what did we do last time?
We did 3rd, 4th, 5th chapter, Prabhuji.
Okay, somebody can revise a few important points.
From 5th chapter,
Yes.
we were hearing that after initiation, person should be more responsible. From 5th chapter, we got that after initiation, person should be more responsible for this responsibility. He must be more serious than before initiation. He should
Right.
not like that divided.
Good.
We talk-
Okay,
we-
that was an
we
important
talk
point
about-
we discussed.
We talk You about three mentioned categories of about, devotee. One is Uttam, mentioned about- Madhya, and Kanishka Adhikari, and then neophyte devotees.
Hmm.
So what is
Right. We discussed about Kanishta Madhyam Uttam, that's right.
we discussed about the
Prabhuji,
basically knowledge and faith of this Uttam, Madhya, Adhikari.
Right. So the classification is based on knowledge and faith. Okay, good. What else?
Prabhuji talked about Bhakti and Mukti. That is, Bhakti is to do with sense gratification, which is Karma Kand. Mukti is to do with liberation, which leads to Jnana. And then the one who is attached to Mahatma can lead to Bhakti.
Right. So Rupa Goswami compares these desires of Bhakti and Mukti to what?
To which
Ghosts.
Dark
Ghosts.
witch.
Yes, the black art of a witch. Yes.
So we saw about the without previous Sukruti, one cannot take up to devotional service. Means no material combination can result up to devotional service.
Yes.
So it has to come from mercy of a devotee. Then
Yes.
after that, the execution of devotional service can help us developing attraction to Krishna. And we may continue to execute, but then the initial trigger comes from the devotee of the Lord.
Causeless mercy.
Initiation means the beginning of the process of devotional service.
Yes.
Devotional service can be practiced from womb to the tomb.
Right. In all places, in all circumstances, by everyone. Yes.
And initiation is not the ticket to go to back to Godhead, or say one has to follow the rules and regulation very strictly
Yes.
after initiation.
That's right. Okay, good.
Spoke about
one more-
Ajnata Sukruti, various ways we get Ajnata Sukruti, and how in ISKCON we should try to like keep all these programs like Harinam Sankirtan, Prasadam distribution, book distribution, and Jagannath Rath Yatra and all.
Right.
So one
So
more
that-
important point.
Go ahead.
So one more important point. Prabhupada said that if someone falls down from the devotional service, take to the Prayaschitta performances for reformation. He has to execute the rules, regulations.
Right. There's no separate Prayaschitta. The Prayaschitta is devotional service itself.
Yes, and then
Okay.
he is sufficient to reinstate. That's sufficient for his reinstatement.
That's right. Okay, good. Okay, fine. So we'll proceed ahead now. So this is the 6th chapter, how to discharge devotional service. Okay, somebody just read the first paragraph.
Sham Chaitanya Prabhuji.
From Prabhupada's book. Prabhupada's book.
1 second. First paragraph.
Yes.
Srila Rupa Goswami states that his elder brother Sanatana Goswami has compiled Hari Bhakti Vilasa for the guidance of the Vaishnavas, and therein has mentioned many rules and regulations to be followed by the Vaishnavas. Some of them are very important and prominent, and Srila Rupa Goswami will now mention these very important items for our benefit. The purport of this statement is that Srila Rupa Goswami proposes to mention only basic principles, not details. For example, a basic principle is that one has to accept a spiritual master. Exactly how one follows the instructions of his spiritual master is considered a detail. For example, if one is following the instructions of his spiritual master and that instruction is different from the instruction of another spiritual master, this is called detailed information. But the basic principle, acceptance, of a spiritual master is good everywhere, although the details may be different. Srila Rupa Goswami does not wish to enter into details here, but wants to place before us only the principles.
Okay. So here basically Rupa Goswami discusses the 64 angas of bhakti. So what is an anga of bhakti? Rupa Goswami says, Atra anga lakshanam. And we will just read the translation. In bhakti, the characteristic of an anga are as follows. The learned define an anga of bhakti as a complex of devotional actions with internal divisions, or only one action of bhakti which does not have clearly defined differences within it. So basically an anga of bhakti means it's a combination, a complex, means a combination of different devotional actions, or it could be just one action of bhakti. So that's what is called as an anga of bhakti. And so Rupa Goswami has given in this chapter, you can see this chapter is basically a list of these 64 items or 64 angas of bhakti. So it said 20 items are of primary importance. Amongst them, 1 to 10 are activities to accept, that's pravritti, and 11 to 20 are activities to avoid nivritti. And there are 44 additional items of service, 21 to 59, which are items other than 6 to 64, 5 most effective items. So, okay, we already have discussed this verse, Sarupadivena Muktam Tatparatvenema Rishikena Rishikeya Sevana Bhakti Ruchate. So basically, bhakti means to engage all the senses in the service of the master of the senses. And so these angas, the 44 angas have also been divided according to the senses, which senses are used, whole body, 11 voice. Anyway, that's detailed thing. Okay, so we will just go through this list. So 20 items of primary importance. So let's read the list of these 20 items. Somebody read.
Saurabh Sharma Prabhuji. Saurabh Sharma Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, page number could you please tell?
It
Yes,
is
the next paragraph. He mentions the basic principles.
Yeah.
sixth chapter.
Yes, Prabhu. Page number 54, correct, Prabhu?
I don't know the page.
Yeah. The next set of instructions is listed.
No.
53,
Second
page number
before.
53, Prabhuji. Second paragraph.
Yes, Prabhu. He mentions the basic principles as follows. Accepting the shelter of lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, becoming initiated by the spiritual master and learning how to discharge devotional service from him, obeying the orders of the spiritual master.
Say with the number. There are 20 items.
Yes, Prabhu. Third, obeying the orders of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. Fourth, following in the footsteps of great acharyas, teachers, under the direction of the spiritual master. Fifth, inquiring from the spiritual master how to advance in Krishna consciousness. Sixth, being prepared to give up anything material for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. This means that when we are engaged in the devotional service of Krishna, we must be prepared to give up something which we may not like to give up, and also we have to accept something which we may not like to accept. Seventh, residing in a sacred place of pilgrimage like Dwarka or Vrindavan. Eighth, accepting only what is necessary or dealing with the material world only as far as necessary. Ninth, observing the fasting day on Ekadashi. And 10th, worshipping sacred trees like the banyan tree. These 10 items are preliminary necessities for beginning the discharge of devotional service in regulative principles. In the beginning, if a neophyte devotee observes the above mentioned 10 principles, surely he will quickly make good advancement in Krishna consciousness. The next set of instructions, yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, continue.
The next set of instructions is listed as follows. 1. One should rigidly give up the company of non-devotees. 2. One should not instruct a person who is not desirous of accepting devotional service. 3. One should not be very enthusiastic about constructing costly temples or monasteries. Fourth, one should not try to read too many books, nor should one develop the idea of earning his livelihood by lecturing on or professionally reciting Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. Fifth, one should not be neglectful in ordinary dealings. Sixth, one should not be under the spell of lamentation in loss or jubilation in gain. Seventh, one should not disrespect the demigods. Eighth, one should not give up unnecessary trouble. One should not give unnecessary trouble to any living entity. Ninth, one should carefully avoid the various offenses in chanting the holy name of the Lord or in worshipping the deity in the temple. 10th, one should be very intolerant towards the blasphemy of Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna or his devotees.
One more.
Yeah.
Read.
Without following the above mentioned 10 principles, one cannot properly elevate himself to the platform of sadhana bhakti or devotional service in practice. Altogether, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions 20 items, and all of them are very important. Out of the 20, the first 3, namely accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, taking initiation from him, and serving him with respect and reverence, are the most important.
Okay, so amongst the first 10 also, the first 3 are most important. Okay, that's fine. So now you find, and we read the first paragraph where Prabhupada is mentioning that the purport of this statement is that Srila Rupa Goswami proposes to mention only basic principles and not details. And is giving an example of what's a principle and what's a detail. So his principle is to accept a spiritual master and then following the instructions or which instructions one gets, that's a detail. Okay, and Srila Rupa Goswami does not wish to enter into details here, but wants to place before us only the principles. So please note this important point. These 64 angas of bhakti, the 64 items of devotional service as mentioned in this chapter, are all principles. Now, what is the difference between a principle and a detail? So a principle is non-adjustable or which cannot be changed. Okay, something which a rule which is non-adjustable or unchangeable, cannot be changed, that's called a principle. Whereas a detail is adjustable. So that's the basic difference between a principle and a detail. Okay, the principle is non-adjustable, not changeable, whereas the detail can be adjusted or changed. So all the 64 principles of devotional service Rupa Goswami is mentioning here are all principles. That means they cannot be changed. Please note this point. Okay, so now we find that Srila Prabhupada in his preaching, especially in the West, seeing the circumstances and the situations and the nature of people there, he made some adjustments in the details, keeping the principles intact. Okay, so he made a few adjustments in the details, at the same time keeping the principles intact. So, can you think of some adjustments Srila Prabhupada made in his preaching?
So Prabhuji, he reduced the number of rounds to 16 from 64.
Okay, fine. So Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, they say, had different rules for different ashrams. So, of course, 64 was mostly for the renounced order. Grihasthas maybe had something less, 32, whatever. In any case, Srila Prabhupada made a standard rule for everyone, that's minimum 16 rounds. Okay, what else?
Giving Gayatri to women.
Yes, that's right, giving Gayatri to women. What else?
Women could perform deity worship.
Yes, that's correct. Women could perform deity worship on the altars.
Prabhupada allowed big temples to be constructed all across the world.
Big temples were always there, isn't it?
But here in this one of the 64 items, it is
No, you don't talk about the 64 items now. Okay. So big temples were always there, isn't it?
Okay.
Sannyasi performing this marriage ceremony.
Yes, that's true. Prabhupada himself performed marriage ceremonies, which is practically unheard of.
Sannyasis crossing 7 seas,
Okay, that's also correct. Of course, some disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur did go, but yes, in a prominent way.
Wearing, casual clothes for preaching.
What?
What allowed sophisticated way of preaching?
Can't hear you.
So still Prabhupada allowed sophisticated methods.
Sophisticated methods. What? Which methods?
Like using for many gadgets.
So much of background noise is there in your this one, or somebody else's this one, or I don't know. Okay.
Prabhuji, Prabhupada allowed Westerners to become sannyasi, which was unheard of in India during that time.
Okay, yes, Westerners got sannyas. Okay.
Prabhupada took Jagannath Rath Yatra outside Puri.
Yes, that's right. Jagannath Rath Yatra all over the world. Yes, that's true.
Brahmana initiation immediately after the first initiation.
Okay, of course, Prabhupada's rule was normally at least 1 year or more. Yes.
Prabhupada, given that not a Brahman, anybody can become a sannyasi and they can be.
Right, so yes, anyone can become a Vaishnava. We discussed that point last time. Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Prabhuji, I have a clarification here. Anybody becoming a Vaishnava?
We'll take questions a little later. We're just listing down now some adjustments Srila Prabhupada made.
Related to the point which was just said as a detail, I thought it is a principle.
We'll discuss. Don't worry.
Prabhuji crossing the ocean and went in west.
Yeah, that somebody told already. There are 2-3 points remaining, adjustments which Srila Prabhupada made.
Allowing men and women to stay in the temple.
Yes, basically Brahmacharini ashram. Of course, they were not staying together. They were staying in separate quarters. But yes, there was the Brahmacharini ashram. That's right.
Prabhuji, Prabhupada has specifically mentioned that whatever place you are living in, you have to do it. You have to do your sadhana properly. He never said that go and live in Vrindavan, Mathura, or Dwarika.
Okay. Well, we are talking about adjustments Srila Prabhupada made in his preaching in the West.
So, Prabhuji, Prabhupada opened many temples, and he knew the devotees are upcoming and they are not following the rules. But he allowed that, wherein he left to Krishna to make sure that the deities are taken care, even though devotees are still not.
Well, he was training them.
Prabhupada
Prabhupada used to travel in costly cars, and also one of the reporters asked in one of the interviews. So
Yes, so that's the principle of Yukta Vairagya, which definitely Srila Prabhupada used. Prabhupada was known as the jet-age guru. Prabhupada was flying around with his entourage. He was going in flights and traveling so much. Yes, that was practically unheard of before.
So one of the things which Prabhupada did is like a temple to have a church kind of structure, even though like people can come with even come and sit in a, even though they can have shoes and socks and they can enter at least for like hearing the lecture. But for
So Prabhupada, of course, that was a special situation in Los Angeles. He didn't do that everywhere. But in Los Angeles, there was at least a plan. I'm not very sure how many days it lasted. But then Prabhupada definitely was, he had a plan of how there must be a provision for people to just walk in with shoes and have darshan from the door and think, okay, that was a small adjustment. But then more important than that, which happened so many times, is which was the first temple of ISKCON?
In New York or
Yes, New York. But what was it?
Storefront.
Huh? Yes, it was a storefront. Yes, 22nd Avenue. It was a storefront. You know, it's a storefront, just like a shop on the side of the road. And Prabhupada converted that into a temple. And then the second temple, which was in San Francisco, that also was a storefront. And of course, later in Los Angeles, they had this church, which they converted. So Prabhupada took so many different places, from storefronts to churches and mansions and castles and ghost town, whatnot. Prabhupada took any place and converted it into a temple. And of course, that was the criticism of some of Prabhupada's god brothers, that what type of temples the Swamiji is constructing and what type of temples he's making. There's no Gopuram, there's no this, there's no that. So yes, but Prabhupada did that. Another significant contribution is, or a significant way of preaching, is this mass book distribution, practically in thousands and millions. Again, something which was unheard of, distribution of religious books in such a mass scale. So we do find that Srila Prabhupada made all these different adjustments in his preaching, and so therefore the preaching expanded. Here's a conversation. Somebody read this.
Abhishek Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. My godbrothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. This is not done in India. Only brahmacharis can live, but I have become successful because I have made this adjustment. Although they criticize me, their Gaudiya mats are empty. The only time they have people coming is during Gaur Purnima to Mayapur for parikrama. And who is coming for parikrama? Widows, women in white. Because I have made this adjustment, I was successful.
Okay, so Prabhupada did make the adjustment. And of course, if you talk about initial days, then Prabhupada did make a lot of adjustments. Like if you know the first deities that were installed, the first deity installation ceremony that took place in ISKCON is Jagannath Baldev Subhadra in San Francisco. But what was the installation ceremony? It was just, everyone was given a candle and everyone just come before the deities and offer the candle. That's all. That was the installation ceremony. So now if somebody sees that, they would say, what is this? But that's what Srila Prabhupada did at that time. And so Prabhupada did make quite a few adjustments. And of course, he did keep increasing the standards as the movement expanded. But Prabhupada did make quite a few adjustments so that especially the Westerners who have no culture, have no idea of devotional service, they could at least begin to accept the process. So now, we have seen some examples of how Srila Prabhupada made some adjustments in the details. Now, in the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada gives nice purports on this point in the Dhruva Maharaj section. So you can read those. So where Narad Muni gives instructions to Dhruva. So you can see that chapter. I don't remember the exact reference now, but the chapter where Narad Muni gives instructions to Dhruva, and he gave instructions to Dhruva of how, with Dhruva, as we know, he was in Madhuvan on the bank of the Yamuna. And Narad Muni gave him instructions to make a deity with mud on the bank of the Yamuna, and then worship that deity with whatever flowers and fruits are available in the forest. That's all. Now, that's not standard deity worship, but then the basic principles of deity worship are being followed. And so therefore, Prabhupada writes a nice purport over there that how Narad Muni made those adjustments because of Dhruva Maharaj's situation, according to time, place, and circumstances. Right. And so another example in the same context, Prabhupada writes of how in the initial days, there was no Tulsi in the Western countries. But then it's not that because there was no Tulsi, then no offering and no prasad. No. The offering was made and the prasad was taken. And then, of course, he thanks Govindasi for introducing Tulsi in the Western countries. Another adjustment Srila Prabhupada did make was that devotees could go in Western clothes, pant and shirt, and distribute books. So Prabhupada did allow that in some cases. So we find Prabhupada made all these adjustments. Now, the important question that arises is that, okay, now Prabhupada had made some adjustments and then he gave us some rules and regulations. Okay, taking the example of 16 rounds of chanting. So we said that yes, Prabhupada made an adjustment. We could say the essential principle is chanting the holy names. Number of rounds is a detail which can be adjusted, and Prabhupada did make that adjustment. So now Prabhupada said minimum of 16 rounds. Now can somebody say after a few years down the line, maybe 20, 30, maybe 50 years down the line, somebody says that, oh, Kali Yuga has progressed too much and so many difficulties and challenges, so 16 rounds is also difficult. Maybe we should reduce to 8. Anyways, it's a detail. Can somebody say that?
No, Prabhu.
No, it's an instruction by the Acharya.
Instruction.
Yes, so that means that instruction of 16 rounds is now no longer a detail, but it is a principle. It is a non-adjustable principle as far as ISKCON is concerned for the next 10,000 years. Right. So similarly, like that, there are so many instructions which Srila Prabhupada has given, and so many programs which Srila Prabhupada has given. Like, for example, the various songs that are sung. The various songs during Mangalarti, it is the Guru Ashtakam, no other song. What is that song they sing in Vrindavan for Mangalarti?
Vibhavari.
Yes, Vibhavari Shesha. That's an instruction only for Vrindavan, nowhere else. Okay, so it's not that somewhere else also they think that we can sing. No, in all of the temples, the song is the Guru Ashtakam. And so similarly, for everything is fixed. Narsingh Puja and Tulsi Arti and Guru Puja, similar in the evening, Sandhya Arti. So everything is fixed. Similarly, during Darshan Arti, again, a very quite, you could say, revolutionary or innovative song during the Darshan Arti. Yamuna Mataji's Govinda Madi Purusham. So these are all non-adjustable principles now, even though technically they are details, technically the details, as we will see. The principle is to sing, principle is to chant. So what song, which song in one sense as a detail. But yet, Srila Prabhupada, as the founder Acharya, has given instructions and they have to be followed for all time. They are non-adjustable principles now. Non-adjustable principles. So, even which deities to be installed, Prabhupada has given all these instructions. And of course, devotees are studying these various instructions, and now slowly things are coming up. Like recently, we know they passed the resolution on not showing Srimati Radharani's lotus feet, which Prabhupada said it that time. Clear letter, clear instruction. But then, unfortunately, devotees either overlooked it or whatever. But then now they realize that Prabhupada has given this instruction. Now they made the resolution. So like that, these are no longer details, but now they have become principles. So now, sometimes, even now, sometimes debates do happen. What can be adjusted, what cannot be adjusted, what can be changed, what cannot be changed. Always there are some controversies and debates going on. And so then the important question arises that what can be changed, what cannot be changed. And so therefore, there is a nice pastime in the life of Srila Prabhupada, which Burjan Prabhu writes in his book, My Glorious Master. So we'll just read that. Okay, somebody read this.
Priyanka Mataji.
Shrutkirti, as he moved to massage Prabhupada's side, asked Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle? Prabhupada's eyes closed and Shrutkirti continued to massage. After a few moments, Prabhupada opened his eyes and said, that takes a little intelligence.
Okay, so now, yes, Prabhupada's answer to how to differentiate between making an adjustment and changing a principle, that means detail and principle, what to be changed, what's not to be changed. Prabhupada says that takes a little intelligence. Now that's like a sutra, a little intelligence, but what does it exactly mean? So Burjan Prabhu expands on this statement of Prabhupada that takes a little intelligence. Maybe Harishetra Prabhu can read this. Nice explanation.
Yes, ma'am. Shrutakirti's question was penetrating, clearly delineating between the adjustable and the non-adjustable, between a detail and a principle. It is not easy. It requires intelligence. To foolishly make a non-adjustable principle. Foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc in spiritual life. And to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted is fanaticism. Fanaticism will cause havoc of a different nature. If we have developed our spiritual intelligence, we can make distinctions between principles and details, but we should confirm our opinions with trusted friends or superiors. If we haven't developed our spiritual intelligence, we should take guidance from those who have. We should not act independently.
Yes, so this is some very important points. So to foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc. So that means something which is non-adjustable, something which should not be changed, somebody changes it. Then the result is havoc. In spiritual life. So in the history of ISKCON, we do have some examples of somebody who tried to change some principles. Like, of course, the one well known to everyone is the Ritviks, who denied the first principle of Rupa Goswami. We just read, the first principle is what? Guru Padashraya, accepting the shelter of lotus feet. So the Ritviks denied that. And so then a whole chaos that resulted from that. So, or you may have heard, it's there in the Lilamrit, the incident when some devotees started calling Srila Prabhupada as God, making Guru into God, which is again not our philosophy. Prabhupada, of course, was very upset and he and he sort of expelled these people from ISKCON. So, so there have been instances like that, and some others also did take place. And as a result, there was havoc. There was havoc. And to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted is fanaticism. So if the details are not adjusted, as we just saw, that Prabhupada made some adjustments in details, and therefore the preaching expanded. And now also, in recent times also, then we find devotees making some adjustments in preaching strategies and techniques according to the present time, place, circumstances. Just like right here, we are having this internet preaching, or all these classes and seminars through Zoom. So, which Srila Prabhupada obviously never did. But then again, it's the principle of Yukta Vairagya, and we are making those adjustments so that the preaching can expand. And so again, in recent times, devotees have started programs like some yoga classes and cooking classes, these things, especially in the Western countries. So, and of course, Prabhupada did start scientific preaching, but college preaching also, Prabhupada's instructions are definitely there, but in a more systematic way, we find devotees doing in more recent times. So we do find that some adjustments in the preaching techniques and styles have been made in recent times according to time, place, circumstances. And if that was not done, then maybe preaching would not have expanded. So therefore, then that would be fanaticism. But in any case, Bhurjan Prabhu makes this important point that to distinguish that as to what can be adjusted, what cannot be adjusted, requires spiritual intelligence, And so therefore, a devotee, of course, is humble, and he does not think that I have advanced spiritual intelligence. A devotee is humble. And so therefore, the suggestion is that we should confirm our opinions with trusted friends or superiors. And so therefore, of course, Srila Prabhupada wanted the collective management of the GBC body so that always there is scope for discussion and confirmation. And I think so I did discuss this point, or at least mention this point when we were having our Bhagavad Gita discussions. And so the example for this is in the first canto of Bhagavatam, when Parikshit Maharaj had already made up his decision to fast for the next 7 days. But still, when all the sages and rishis from all over the universe assembled over there, then he took advantage of their association to confirm his decision. He already made his decision, but he confirmed his decision with the assembled great sages and rishis. And there Prabhupada makes that important point that any decision, however important it may be, must always be confirmed with superior authorities. That makes the matter perfect. So that's the safe path. That's a safe path, that even if we have, we sort of understood what can be adjusted, what cannot be adjusted, but the safe path is to confirm with trusted friends and superiors, then that makes it more confirmed. So that's the discussion on principles and details. Okay, this is a quote from the Madhya Leela. Somebody read this?
Dameshwar Prabhuji.
Is it audible?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Angas of Sadhana Bhakti.
A little louder, please.
Angas of Sadhana Bhakti. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura mentions that if one maintains within his heart the desire to enjoy the result of good work, or being embarrassed by the material world, the desire to get out of material entanglement, one will never be able to attain the transcendental mellows of devotional service. In other words, one must not desire material profit when rendering devotional service. Even if one follows all the 64 regulative principles, he cannot attain pure devotional service with a contaminated heart. Madhya
Yes.
19.
So therefore, the definition of pure devotional service, of course, we already discussed that. So Rupa Goswami has already given that definition. Anya vilashita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavritam. So those principles need to be followed. Otherwise, even if one is following all the rules and regulations, but if there's a contaminated heart, if the devotional service is contaminated by material desires, karma jnana, then obviously one cannot make much progress and he cannot attain pure devotional service. Okay, we already discussed this point. The first 3 angas are the principal ones amongst the first 10 also. Okay, fine. So that's the 6th chapter. So the rest of the 6th chapter is basically a list of the 64 items. And in fact, most of this rest of the discussion on sadhana bhakti from the next chapter onwards till chapter 14 is basically an explanation of these 64 angas of bhakti. And of course, Rupa Goswami substantiates them with many shastric references. So you can go through the list yourself, and of course, we'll be discussing them in the further chapters. Okay, maybe we can take a few questions before we proceed to the next chapter.
Yes, Ruji, there are 2 questions. Yes, there are 2 questions, Ruji, so far. First one is by Harikshit Ruji. That's at 7:36 a.m.
Okay, worshipping sacred trees like banyan tree. This, of course, in the list, Prabhupada is putting only banyan tree, but as we will see in the discussion of that item, which comes later on, then it is said banyan tree or tulsi tree. So then we worship tulsi. So that's fine. Okay. So devotees calling Srila Prabhupada was not as, but now this is the calling the spiritual masters Prabhupada. That's not a no. There's no principle in the list of 64 angas. There's no principle there. So it's just a way of addressing. So it's not some principle and adjustment and things like that. No, Prabhupada, you read in the purports, Prabhupada explains that Prabhupada, what is the meaning of Prabhupada? Anyone who has taken the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Prabhu. So he's called Prabhupada. So therefore, Prabhupada is a general term. Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, and so many acharyas are addressed by the word Prabhupada. And so it's a general title. So that's no big adjustment there. It's not a principle. We'll discuss that, not constructing costly temples. We will discuss that. Each of these angas will be discussed. So don't ask details about any of the angas. Now again, the last thing is the same thing. All the angas will be discussed. So there's later on. Okay, fine. I think so. We'll just proceed. So chapter 7. Chapter 7. Evidence regarding devotional principles. So the first one is Guru Padashraya, accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So in that connection, Rupa Goswami quotes this verse from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, which Srila Prabhupada, of course, also gives in his book. Prabhupada gives the translation. So it's a famous verse which Srila Prabhupada quoted very often. Prabhu the Tumarajnimi. Tasmad Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shrayotamam Shabde Parecha Nishnatam Brahmanya Upashmashrayam. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. Okay, so as Prabhupada explained very often, one approaches a spiritual master, tasmad gurum prapadyeta, for the purpose of jigyasu, for the purpose of inquiry. As Prabhupada said very often, one doesn't accept a spiritual master simply as a fashion, but the purpose is inquiry, jigyasu. Inquiry about what? Shreya uttamam. So prayas and shreyas. Prayas is immediate benefit and shreyas is long-term benefit. And the long-term benefit is uttamam, that is to get out of tamas. And what is the qualification of the spiritual master? Shabde parecha nishnatam. So Shabda Brahma. That is the spiritual sound vibration. Or pare means transcendental, Shabde pare. Transcendental sound vibration, nishnatam. That means he must be convinced of these conclusions of the scriptures. And so, upasham ashrayam. So having taken shelter of Brahmani, that is the supreme Brahman. So they have taken shelter of the supreme lords and they have understood the conclusions of the scriptures. So that's the purpose of taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and the qualification of the spiritual master. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, in the book, Srila Prabhupada adds the first verse of the Nectar of Instruction, the translation of that, Vachaveda Manaskrodaveda. So one who's fortunate enough to come under the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master is sure to traverse the path of spiritual salvation without any doubts. Next is accepting initiation from the spiritual master and receiving instructions from him. So Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur says only a person who has understood the futility of material sense gratification can approach a bona fide spiritual master. So that's the qualification of the disciple. So the qualification of the disciple is that he must have understood the futility of material sense gratification, wants to renounce sense gratification, become serious in spiritual life. That's the qualification of the disciple. So this is the next one. So again, Rupa Goswami quotes from the 11th canto. Tatra Bhagavatam Dharman Sikshed Gurvatma Devata Amaya Yano Vritya Yes Dushid Atmatma Dohari. Accepting the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity, the disciple should learn from him the process of pure bhakti by sincere service. By that pure bhakti, the Lord, the Supreme Soul, will be satisfied and give himself to that devotee. Prabhupada sort of expands on this within his book. So somebody can read from the book this point, accepting initiation from the Spirit.
Uncle Prabhuji.
Sage Prabhupada continued to speak to the kings as follows. My dear king, a disciple has to accept the spiritual master not only as a spiritual master, but also as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul. In other words, the disciple should accept the spiritual master as God because he is the external manifestation of Krishna. This is confirmed in every scripture, and the disciple should accept the spiritual master as such. One should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously and with all respect the veneration for the spiritual master. Hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam is the religious process which elevates one to the platform of serving and loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. This is confirmed in the Vedas, and Rupa Goswami will further explain that for a person who has unflinching faith in God and the spiritual master, everything becomes revealed very easily.
Yes. So the spiritual master should be accepted as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul. The disciple should accept the spiritual master as God, because he's the external manifestation of Krishna. And as we recite every morning, Sakshad Haritvena Samasta Shastri. So, the spiritual master is as good as Hari, Sakshad Hari. But he's not Hari. But he's Sakshad Hari. He's as good as Hari. So what is the difference and what is the similarity? Why he is as good as Hari and why he is not Hari? A basic question. I'm sure this must have been covered in Disciples course, but I just want to check. So what makes the spiritual master as good as Hari and why he is not Hari?
He is representative of God, but he is not God.
Yes. So why he cannot be called God? What's the problem?
He cannot be called
because
spiritual
they
master.
give the same knowledge as Krishna has given. So
yes,
the philosophy itself will become wrong.
One input here. I see mostly like same devotees are answering to you may ask some specific this one or some distribution should be there somewhere.
I can't do all that. Maybe Siddharth Prabhu can figure that out.
Okay. Achyutarjan Sakha Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So this philosophy of considering Guru to be God is wrong, because Prabhupada says in one of the lectures that one day you can become Guru, so you will also become God. So this is a wrong philosophy.
So what's the basic difference between Guru and God?
Guru is a transparent via medium between God and the disciple. And
okay,
Guru
that is
knows...
true, but what philosophically, what makes the difference?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Guru is made up of Panch Tattva, but Krishna
Okay,
is
Guru is made of Panch Tattva. That's the material body, but we know that we are not the body.
So a Guru is serving the lotus feet of Lord Krishna.
Okay.
But Krishna is not serving.
That's correct. Okay, fine. So he is...
Guru is also Jivat, Atma, and the Super Soul is Paramatma. So that's...
Yes, that's the important point. The Guru is always Jiva Tattva. The Guru remains Jiva Tattva, and God is God. So you could accept Krishna or all the other Swamsha expansions, the Vishnu Tattva, but then that's all Vishnu Tattva. The spiritual master is always Jiva Tattva. Okay, so therefore, the Guru can never be God. Okay, so one could say the Guru is a Nitya Siddha and he came from the spiritual world and this and that. One could say all that, but still, the basic fundamental difference is that the Guru is Jiva Tattva and God is God. So that's all Vishnu Tattva. So that's the primary difference. That's the primary difference. And so then, of course, when he comes to the material world, then he has a material body. And so therefore, now when he has a material body, then there are going to be the limitations of the material body on the Guru. This point needs to be clearly understood because within our own movement, there have been problems in the past because of not having a proper philosophical understanding of these things. So therefore, understanding that the Guru has a material body, so therefore, the frailties or the inadequacies or the limitations of the material body apply. So therefore, we find Srila Prabhupada, he's old, and so therefore, we all know he forgets some verses in between. As he's lecturing, sometimes he asks, what's the verse? Or he makes some mistakes in recitation of verses. So one cannot say that, oh, what's this? No, Guru should not make mistakes. Why is the Guru making mistakes? No. One should understand that, yes, he still has a material body. And so therefore, the influence of Jara, Vyadi is going to be there on the material body. Though his consciousness may not be affected, as we see Srila Prabhupada, even though he was old and diseased, but then till the last moment of his life, he was translating and giving purpose to the Bhagavatam. So his consciousness was not affected. But then material body, so the body was definitely affected. And so therefore, one should understand this point, and one should not think that nothing should happen to the Guru. The Guru should be perfect in all respects, and the Guru should know everything about everything, physics, chemistry, history, geography. He should know everything. No, he knows the essence of everything. That's Krishna. So one cannot expect that the Guru should be perfect in all these material subject matters. So then that brings us to the point. So what makes the Guru as good as God? Sakshat Haritve. So we have seen the difference. Difference is Jiva Tattva, Vishnu Tattva. Then what makes him as good as God? Yes?
Like Srila Prabhupada mentions about the aspect of...
No. Harishetra Prabhu, question is not for you. Let others answer.
His knowledge or his surrender to the God and
he's a representative of the Lord, delivering the same message as the Lord does.
Yes. So that's the point. So the basic thing is that he is repeating. He's repeating the message of God. And so because the message of God or the instructions of God are as good as God's. Now, there's no difference. Everything is on the absolute platform. Instructions of God are as good as God. And so because he's repeating the instructions as it is, so therefore he is called Sakshat Hari. Okay. So if you know the history of ISKCON, then you may have heard how then because of not having a proper philosophical understanding of all these things, then when the Guru leaves, then so therefore the Guru being Jiva Tattva, then the Guru also has a potential of being influenced by the material energy Maya, because it's still Jiva Tattva. It's not that he's above the influence of the material energy. And so therefore we have seen in the past that gurus came under the influence of material energy, and then they gave up ISKCON, they gave up devotional service. But then because of not having a proper philosophical understanding, then we have seen that how so many hundreds and hundreds of devotees, disciples and followers, they also left the path of devotional service. So therefore one must have a clear understanding of all these points. And so that's what Prabhupada is writing here, that yes, one should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously with all respect and veneration. And so therefore the important thing is that, yes, now again a famous verse which Srila Prabhupada quoted very often, that is, Yasya deve parabhakti yatha deve tatha guru tasya katita yatha prakashante mahatmana. So, Yasya deve parabhakti yatha deve tatha guru. So as much faith in the Supreme Lord, same faith in the Guru. And why? Because the Guru is simply repeating the same message of God. So therefore one can have faith. As long as he's repeating, no problem. So then one can have the same faith in Guru and follow his instructions. And that's how then prakashanti, then everything is revealed to such a sincere disciple. Okay. Okay, we'll just, okay, the next one is serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence. So sort of already been covered. So again, in that context, again, we find that Rupa Goswami is quoting from the 11th canto, 17th chapter, verse 27. Okay, somebody read the next point. Serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence. Somebody read.
Serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence. Regarding accepting initiation from the spiritual master, in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 17th chapter, verse 27, it is stated by Lord Krishna, "My dear Uddhava, the spiritual master must be accepted not only as my representative, but as my very self. He must never be considered on the same level with an ordinary human being. One should never be envious of the spiritual master as one may be envious of an ordinary man. The spiritual master should always be seen as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by serving the spiritual master, one is able to serve all the demigods.
Okay, so this is again a famous verse from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Acharya Mam Vijaniya. So Krishna himself is speaking to Uddhav. And so he says that the Acharya is as good as myself. Manyeta Karhichit. So one should never consider the spiritual master to be an ordinary human being. The Acharya especially. The Acharya. So therefore, he must never be considered on the same level with an ordinary human being, and so one should not be envious. And rather one should serve with great faith and confidence. Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasada yasya prasada nagati kutu. So then that's how one makes great progress. Okay, so this is a quote from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Somebody read this?
Sita Mataji.
The criterion is that a devotee must know.
The criterion is devotee must know him to do. This understanding can be achieved through the medium of a spiritual master who is bona fide representative of Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami advises Adav Guru Ashrayam, one who is serious in wanting to render pure devotional service to the Lord must take shelter of a spiritual master who comes in the disciplic succession from Krishna. Evam parampara praptam imam rajashayo vidu. Bhagavad Gita 4.2. Without accepting a bona fide spiritual master coming in the disciplic succession, one cannot find out the real purpose of devotional service. Therefore, one has to accept the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and agree to be directed by him. The first business of a pure devotee is to satisfy his spiritual master, whose only business is to spread Krishna consciousness. And if one can satisfy the spiritual master, Krishna is automatically satisfied. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada.
Okay, fine. So I think so we covered the point. So a devotee must know what Krishna wants him to do. So what Krishna wants him to do, that can be understood only through the bona fide spiritual master who must come in parampara. And of course, we know the famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Okay, so that's how one must first of all surrender. So Prabhupada, in one lecture, Prabhupada says, Pranipat, the first step is surrender. That means one must have faith and confidence and be ready to follow the instructions. So otherwise, Srila Prabhupada says, if one is not ready to follow the instructions, then why go to a spiritual master? So why waste his time and why waste your time? So only if one has serious business to progress in devotional service, then one should approach the spiritual master, then render service, and then inquire. Okay, so this is a quote from the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam. Somebody read?
Satyajivan Gaur Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji, please go.
The incident herein described is very significant. In a previous verse, it is stated, Vina Mahatpada Rajo Abhishekam. One cannot attain perfection without smearing the dust from the lotus feet of an exalted devotee on his head. If one always follows the order of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. As soon as a foolish disciple tries to overtake his spiritual master and become ambitious to occupy his post, he immediately falls down. Yassa pasadat bhagavat pasado. Yassa pasadam na gati kutopi. If the spiritual master is considered an ordinary man, the disciple surely loses his chance to advance further, despite a very rigid life in devotional service. Bharat Maharaj did not consult a spiritual master when he became overly attached to a deer. Consequently, he became strongly attached to the deer and forgetting his spiritual master, he falls down.
Spiritual routine. Okay. So anyways, so the important point is that yes, these are the instructions of Jad Bharat to Maharaj Raghuna. Vinamat Padarajobhishekam. So one has to smear himself with the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee, which obviously may not be in the literal sense, but the most important thing is to follow the instructions. And so Prabhupada writes, if one always follows the orders of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. But the important word there is always, always. So if one always follows, then there's no question of falling down, obviously. So if one always follows, then one will not be affected by the material energy, and there's no question of falling down. But as soon as the foolish disciple, he has all these material desires to become like the spiritual master or better than the spiritual master, or has all these material aspirations for puja, la, pratishtha, and all that, then he becomes influenced by the material energy, and then he immediately falls down. And so therefore, this is the Jad Bharat, this is Bharat Maharaj, who became attached to the deer. And so therefore, as we know, he was on a very high elevated platform of devotional service, almost on the Bhava platform. But still, Prabhupada is writing here, despite a very rigid life in devotional service, Bharat Maharaj did not consult a spiritual master when he became overly attached to a deer. Okay, so even though he was on the Bhava platform, still, because he did not consult a spiritual master. In fact, in that whole pastime of Bharat Maharaj, this is the only purport where Prabhupada gives this very pinpointed reason of Bharat Maharaj's fall down. Bharat Maharaj did not consult a spiritual master. So obviously, when he became attached to the deer and his spiritual practices were going down, if he would have consulted a spiritual master, then obviously the spiritual master would have said, give up the deer. But then he did not. And then we know the results. And so therefore, the important point is that at no point of time, how much ever advanced one may be, one should not think that now I'm so great, I'm so advanced, I don't need to consult anyone, now I can be on my own. That's a big danger, because the moment one thinks I can be on my own, then that's where Maya attacks. And the classic example here is Bharat Maharaj. And so therefore, these principles that we're talking about here, they always apply. They always apply. Not that these principles apply in the neophyte stage, in the advanced stage, they're not applicable. No. Therefore, we have made the point right in the beginning that the principles are non-adjustable, unchangeable at all times, at all times. And of course, within the history of our own movement, there are hundreds of cases, so we don't need to talk about them. But the principle remains that even though one is so advanced, like Bharat Maharaj, on the platform of Bhava, literally, but still, because he did not consult, then we see the consequences. So therefore, of course, Prabhupada does explain that Bharat Maharaj's case was orchestrated by the Supreme Lord to teach all of us a good lesson. But then that's a lesson we have to learn, that how much ever advanced, how much of a senior one may be, but the principle of consulting higher authorities always applies. Okay, the next Anga is following in the footsteps of saintly persons, which Srila Prabhupada often said as Sadhu Marganu Gamanam, following in the footsteps of the previous Acharyas, which is the previous sadhus, which is very, very important again. Okay, so let's read from Prabhupada's book.
Bro.
Yes, bro. Which paragraph? Sorry.
The last, on page 60, the last item, following in the footsteps of saintly persons.
Following the footsteps of saintly persons. One, just turning.
Why is it taking so much time?
I'm scrolling down from the system, Prabhu.
Starts with in the Skanda Puran. Starts with that.
One second.
Uh,
I'm sorry. I'm not finding it, Prabhu. In 7th chapter.
okay, Prabhu, meantime.
Residing in a sacred place, is that the title? In the Skanda Puran, it is also said.
In the Skanda Puran, it is advised that a devotee follow the Pasacharyas. That one.
No,
Prabhu, you can look for it.
Somebody else can read.
Yeah, my apologies.
Meantime, Sangram Prabhuji.
Devotee should pay attention to what's going on.
In the Skanda Puran, it is advised that a devotee follow the past acharya and saintly persons. Because by such following, one can achieve the desired result with no chance of lamenting or being baffled in his progress. The scripture known as Brahma Yamala states as follows: if someone wants to pose himself as a great devotee without following the authority of the revealed scripture, then his activities will never help him to make progress in devotional service. Instead, he will simply create disturbances for the sincere student of devotional service. Those who do not strictly follow the principle of revealed scripture are generally called Sahajiyas. Those who have imagined everything to be cheap, who have their own concocted ideas, and who do not follow the scriptural injunction.
Such persons are simply creating disturbance in the discharge of devotional service. So this is the verse that Prabhupada is quoting from the Brahma Yamala, which of course Rupa Goswami is quoting. It's a famous verse which Prabhupada quoted quite often. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Panchratra Vidim Vina Ekantaki Harer Bhaktir Utmateva Kalpate. So even if a person seems to have attained steadiness in practicing pure bhakti to the Lord, that bhakti is a misfortune but rejects the rules of Shruti Smriti. So therefore, the important point here is that one has to follow. One has to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. One has to follow the scriptures, and not that one practice devotional service whimsically, which the Sahajiyas do, as Prabhupada is talking about here. The Sahajiyas does not strictly follow the principles of revealed scriptures, generally called Sahajiyas. Sahaj means cheap. So they imagine themselves, pose themselves to be very advanced in devotional service. And so, of course, the Sahajiyas is a whole upper sampradaya. So sometimes we'll discuss this again when we discuss Raghunaga Bhakti. But then they pose themselves as very advanced devotees, but then they don't follow strictly the various principles of the scriptures. And so therefore, they have their own concocted ideas, and the result is utpateva kalpati. The result is this utpat, this havoc, because of all these unauthorized, non-bona fide people who pose themselves as devotees and mislead so many others. And so then there are so many problems because of that. So therefore, the devotional service must always be in line with the previous sadhus, the previous acharyas, and the scriptures. And then Prabhupada explains about Buddhism, because Lord Buddha rejected the scriptures. And so, of course, we know that Lord Buddha had a specific purpose. And so Prabhupada basically explains about Buddhism and the rest of those points. Then there are some angas which are very simple and which really don't need much explanation. So you can read them on your own. We are not going through all of them. So inquiring about the eternal religious principles and being prepared to give up everything. Residing in a sacred place, that we will discuss when we discuss what Mathura was. Accepting only what is necessary. So you can read that. Okay, now we will read observing fasting on Ekadashi. Somebody read that. Observing fasting on Ekadashi, and the next one, offering respect to the banyan trees. Maybe both of them. Somebody.
Pradeep Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Observing fasting on Ekadashi. In Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it is said that one who observes fasting on Ekadashi day is freed from all kinds of reactions to sinful activities and advance in pious life. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The best thing to do on fasting days is to remember the pastimes of Govinda and to hear his holy name constantly. Offering respect to the banyan trees. In Skanda Purana, it is directed that a devotee should offer water to the Tulsi plant and Amalaka trees. He should offer respect to the cows and to the Brahmanas and should serve the Vaishnavas by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. All of these processes will help the devotee to diminish the reactions of his sinful activities.
Okay,
Giving
fine.
up.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So the important point about Ekadashi, as Prabhupada is writing, is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for God. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada didn't emphasize so much on the fasting, but then he emphasized more on the increasing of chanting and hearing and remembering the Lord. That's most important. Okay, so not that one is just fasting on Ekadashi. I mean, of course, everyone definitely has to fast from grains and things like that. But then, of course, Srila Prabhupada did allow some Ekadashi prasad. So, but if one just fasts and just sleeps, then that's no use. Or if one is just fasting and then one is so weak that he cannot render any service or he cannot chant, then that's not what is recommended. So the most important thing is that one increases one's devotional service on Ekadashi. Not that I'm fasting nirjal, so I just sleep. So no, that's not what's recommended. And regarding the banyan tree, as I already mentioned the point, so here you can see it's Tulsi plant is mentioned, and not only Tulsi, but also cows and Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Okay, now a very important anga of bhakti is giving up the company of non-devotees. So, okay, somebody can read from Prabhupada's book, maybe the first two paragraphs and the points.
Indu Mataji.
Giving up the company of non-devotees. Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his householder devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna and another class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called Avaishnava, and their company should be strictly avoided. In the Khatyayana Samhita, it is stated that even if one is forced to live within a cage of iron or in the midst of a blazing fire, he should accept this position rather than live with non-devotees who are through and through against the supremacy of the Lord. Similarly, in the Vishnu Rahasya, there is a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods impelled by material desire.
Okay,
in the
fine.
scriptures,
Okay. So here, we find these references from the Katyayana Samhita and the Vishnu Rahasya, which says that better to be in a cage of blazing fire or to embrace a snake, a tiger, or crocodile than to associate with non-devotees. Why do you think the Shastras are giving such strong references or strong examples? So why do you think it's better to be in a cage of blazing fire than the Asat Sangha?
Because one can get rid of these things by some way, but with the association of non-devotee, it is so much poisonous that you can't get out from that.
Get out from what?
Get out from the bad habits or the materialistic things.
Okay. Okay. Somebody else?
Requesting devotees to please raise hand. Ankur Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So if one is like in association of non-devotees, he will like not able to advance in the devotional service, he will again go in the cycle of birth and death. But if he is in with blazing fire, then even he is in the thinking about the Lord, then he can be liberated or go to the planets of Lord.
Okay. Okay. Somebody else?
Satyajivan Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. So if someone associates with non-devotee, it is there is a very high chance that he will acquire that same quality of the non-devotee. So it is very difficult to get rid of. But other than if the whatever mentioned in the Katyayana Samhita, that like blazing fire and all, so those meaning external things that can be recovered from.
Achha. Okay, fine. Maybe one more we could take.
Okay, Anand Prabhuji.
Yeah, I think similar to the points raised, if one gives up his body in association of devotees, one will reach a supreme destination from where he can again practice bhakti, right? Which is not going to be the recourse when he associates with non-devotees.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, so basically all these will destroy just the body, the material body, which anyways is going to die one day. So blazing fire and all this will just destroy the material body. But by associating with non-devotees, one will lose the propensity to serve. The propensity to serve, that will be covered and serve the Lord. And so therefore, the Shastras are saying it's better to be in a cage of blazing fire and all that, rather than associate with non-devotees. And so therefore, this association with non-devotees is extremely dangerous for devotees. So now, in the present age, what are the different ways in which devotees can get contaminated by non-devotee association? What are some of the ways? Let's hear a few.
So, kindly raise hand, Prabhuji. I'm sorry, but we'll follow this. Okay, Nishan Prabhuji, you can go first since you were speaking.
Yeah, so in present age, Prabhuji, reading different books from different authors, not following scripture, that can
Yes.
mind and degrade us.
Yes, very good. That's one of the very prominent ways of being influenced by satsang, reading all types of books. Yes, what else?
Okay, Saurabh Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, the multimedia content, what we are in description, we are following that without.
Yes, so much media and so much of information and so many things. Yes. What else?
Karthik Prabhuji.
Association of non-devotees in the office, Prabhu. There are a lot
Yes.
of influence.
Yes, that's correct. Non-devotees in the office, workplace.
Indu Mataji.
Kids getting associated with non-devotee.
Was that?
And thereby we will have to some kids getting associated with non-devotee kids, and that way we have to have a relationship with non-devotee.
Okay, non-devotee kids. Anything else?
Vikasana Prabhuji.
You were discussing Prajalpa.
Yes, Prajalpa talking.
Sakya Prem Prabhuji, Vagisha Mataji.
Associating with the family members who are also like kind of non-devotees.
Yes, that's right.
Satyajivan Prabhuji.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, Prabhuji. Taking foods from the non-devotee.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, very important. Yes, food from non-devotees. Yes. Okay, fine. So these are some of the ways in which one could be influenced by non-devotees. So that brings us to a very fundamental point. So what exactly is meant by association? Because some of you have said points like family member, associating with family members and people at workplace and things. So we obviously have to be with people in the workplace or family members. So then what exactly does association mean?
Prabhuji, getting influenced by them.
Yes, very true. That's quite a precise answer. Getting influenced by them. So then, how does one get influenced? How does one get influenced and how does one not get influenced then?
Mallikarjun Prabhuji.
Accepting, hearing their aspirations and getting influenced by that and making them our aspirations by not having strong sadhana. When we are weak, we can also
Okay, fine. Yes, so an important way of being influenced is by hearing from them. Yes, that means we hear seriously and we're influenced by what they're saying. Right. What else?
Abhayanand Prabhuji.
Involving in the activities with them, basically like watching movies and all.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Avoiding chanting in place of chanting, doing the other activities with them, and not following the rules what you have prescribed by yourself.
Yes.
Nishant Prabhuji.
Because so sometimes because they are our family members, relatives, have our duty to perform to our parents, but we sometimes get sentimental about it and lose the focus. And the reason is that if our sadhana is not proper, if we are not focusing, finding out time to read Srila Prabhupada's book, focus on relative principles, then the chances are high that we will look for some other attraction, and which could be extended families like parents, relatives.
Yes. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada explains that the basic ways of association are, as Rupa Goswami gives the nectar of instruction, and that is the 6 ways: Dadati Pratigranati, Guhyamakyati Prachuti, Bhunte Bhojate Cheva. So these are Shadvida Priti Lakshanam. So these are Priti Lakshanam. That means exchanges of love. So when we perform these activities with anyone, then there's a good possibility that we could be influenced by them. So exchanging gifts, and especially the next two, and that is hearing from them confidentially, discussing confidential matters and taking things very seriously about what they say. And then we reveal some confidential things. So that means there's an intimacy. So when there's intimacy, there's some sneha, there is some affection and intimacy, then we will be influenced. Again, the third one, the food items, because the consciousness very much goes into the food. And so therefore, one must be, I think so we discussed this point before. In Bhagavad Gita, we were discussing, I suppose. So when we're discussing Patram Pushpam, so we discussed this point. So this 6 loving exchanges with whom we perform, we are likely to be influenced. And so therefore, as Prabhupada did say, so obviously we cannot avoid the workplace and non-devotees in the workplace, nor can we avoid family members. But the principle should be, we give association, we don't take association, right? So just like the best example is that of Prahlad Maharaj, who had a demoniac father. But Prahlad was always respectful to him. He was always respectful to him, he had affection to him, but he never followed what he said. Rather, he was trying to give his association to him. So that's how. So we try to give association to the non-devotees, but not that we become influenced by them. And for that, of course, our own sadhana practices and our practice of devotional service should be strong. Okay. Now, some other important points on the subject matter. It's a very important subject matter, so therefore we're getting into some details. Okay, somebody read this. This is important purpose from the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Full approve.
From the screen, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes. Giving up the company of non-devotees. While the bhakti creeper is growing, the devotee must protect it by fencing it all around. The neophyte devotee must be protected by being surrounded by pure devotees. In this way, he will not give the maddened elephant a chance to uproot his bhakti creeper. When one associates with non-devotees, the maddened elephant is set loose. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Asat Sanga Tyaga, a Vaishnavachar, Madhyalila 2287. The first business of a Vaishnava is to give up the company of non-devotees. A so-called mature devotee however, commits a great offense by giving up the company of pure devotees. The human being is a social animal, and if one gives up the society of pure devotees, he must associate with non-devotees, asatsanga. By contacting non-devotees and engaging in non-devotional activities, a so-called mature devotee will fall victim to the mad elephant offense. Whatever growth has taken place is quickly uprooted by such an offense. One should therefore be very careful to defend the creeper by fencing it in. That is, by following the regulative principles and associating with pure devotees.
Okay, so we know about, we discussed before also about the Bhakti Lata, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu discusses in his teachings to Rupa Goswami. So now as the Bhakti Lata is growing, just like any tender plant is growing, then the plant needs to be protected by fencing it so that different animals don't come and eat. So similarly, the Bhakti Lata needs to be fenced, needs to be protected. And what is that fencing? What is the protection? Two things Prabhupada is saying. What is the fencing? Following the regulative principles. Regulative principles here indicates 64 angas. Please note. Okay, so actually the 4 regulative principles are not within the 64 angas of bhakti. The 4 regulative principles which we follow are just so that we give up sinful life, which is animalistic life. But they are not angas of bhakti. So whenever we talk about the regulative principles of bhakti, then it refers to the 64 angas. So following the regulative principles and associating with pure devotees. This is the fencing. This is the fencing of the Bhakti Lata. So if we remain always with devotees and we associate only with devotees and follow all the rules and regulations, that's how our Bhakti Lata will be protected. And if we give up the association of devotees and if we associate with non-devotees, the result will be, as Prabhupada writes here, that one associates with the non-devotees, the maddened elephant is set loose. That means one commits Vaishnava Prad. So why? Why? Because when one associates with non-devotees, one takes the non-devotees seriously. And as a result of being influenced by non-devotees, one loses respect for devotees. And as Prabhupada writes here, the human being is a social animal. If one gives up society of pure devotees, he must associate with non-devotees. So someone he has to associate with. So if one gives up the association of devotees, then he must associate with non-devotees. It's a must. Because the human being can't just be alone. So therefore, then when one associates with non-devotees, one loses respect for devotees. When one loses respect for devotees, the next thing is offense. And that's how one allows the mad elephant to enter. So here, it's quite interesting in these purports, Prabhupada, in this purport you can see Prabhupada uses the term a so-called mature devotee. Twice he uses the term, so-called mature devotee. And in other purports also Prabhupada used that term. So we find the trouble is always with a so-called mature devotee. Because usually new devotees are careful. New devotees think, oh, anyways, we are new and Maya is very powerful and so we want to progress. So usually we find new devotees are careful. And those who are actually mature, they are humble. Those are actually mature, they are humble. They think, oh we are not so advanced, so better we be careful. So the actually mature devotees, they are also protected. The problem is with the so-called mature devotee. Who are imagining themselves to be very mature, maybe just because they spent a few years in devotional service or they got some material talents and skills. And so they have influenced a few people. And so therefore they imagine themselves to be very mature. But they're not actually so mature. Then they think, oh, we are mature, so therefore we don't have to be so careful. And then they loosely associate with non-devotees, they don't follow rules and regulations strictly, and they land in problem. So it's usually the so-called mature devotees who land in problem. And therefore Prabhupada, you see, he mentions that term twice, right in this purport and in other purports also. So that's how the influence of the non-devotees is so dangerous. Sorry. Now, this is another important purport as to how Srila Prabhupada so much, therefore, considering the importance of association of devotees, Srila Prabhupada was very emphatic that devotees don't leave ISKCON. Okay, now read this.
Raghavendu Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Even if one thinks that there are many pseudo-devotees or non-devotees in the Krishna consciousness society, still one should stick to the society. If one thinks the society's members are not pure devotees, one can keep direct company with the spiritual master, and if there is any doubt, one should consult the spiritual master. However, unless one follows the spiritual master's instructions concerning the regulative principles and chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord, one cannot become a pure devotee. By one's mental concoctions, one falls down. By associating with non-devotee, one breaks the regulative principles and is thereby lost.
Okay, so you can see how Prabhupada says, even if one thinks there are many pseudo-devotees or non-devotees in the Krishna consciousness society, so he's specifically referring to ISKCON. So even if, it's possibility of the impossible, even if. So it's not the case, surely not the case, but even if one thinks, as we do find some devotees saying this, oh, there are no pure devotees within our society, so, and Prabhupada says one must associate with pure devotees, so where are the pure devotees? So we find some devotees speaking like this, and of course they leave ISKCON also. So Prabhupada writes here, even if one thinks so, that there are pseudo-devotees and non-devotees, which is not the case, but still stick to the society. And then what to do? Okay, everyone is neophyte, fine, but at least one person you consider to be advanced, your own spiritual master, associate with him. Associate with him. And then consult him. And then, but then the important condition Prabhupada says is one should follow the spiritual master's instructions. And obviously what the spiritual master will say? The bona fide spiritual master will obviously say, remain in ISKCON, serve devotees. And that's the instructions which he will give. But one should follow. Otherwise, one can't make progress. One cannot become a pure devotee. So this is how Srila Prabhupada emphasized not leaving ISKCON. And in that context, obviously, we can remember, I'm sure in the past few days, we all have been hearing about His Holiness Bhakti Charaswami Maharaj and his instructions. And so many devotees, they have been telling us of three important instructions which Bhakti Charaswami Maharaj always gave, and of course, which we have also personally heard from him. So that is, and one which he repeated very often is never leave ISKCON. That's the instruction which he received from Srila Prabhupada. And of course, the second is always follow the GBC. And the third one is, what's the third one? Never leave ISKCON. Always
cooperate with devotees.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, always cooperate with other devotees. Yes. So therefore, we find that yes, Bhakti Charaswami Maharaj very much following Srila Prabhupada's instructions, and so you can see here how Prabhupada emphasized it so much. Never leave ISKCON. And you can take note of another important reference where Prabhupada makes the same point, is the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, 9th chapter, verse number 11, 4, 9, 11. And there also in that purport, the context is Dhruva Maharaj is praying to the Lord to always give him the association of devotees where there's the nectarian flow of Krishna Katha. And in that purport also Srila Prabhupada writes that anyone who thinks he can practice devotional service outside this society of devotees, referring to the ISKCON society, he is simply in a hallucination. He says it is impossible. It is impossible. These are the words which Prabhupada uses. Impossible. So that's how Srila Prabhupada was so emphatic on remaining within ISKCON and practicing devotional service. And so therefore, it's very important that first of all, we remain within ISKCON and not just remain, but associate with serious devotees. And association means that we take their instruction seriously and avoid the asatsang, as all of you have told, various sources of asatsang. And so therefore, within our own society, we have seen so many people leaving the society because of the various ways of asatsang, reading, especially reading so many books. Of course, we'll be discussing the point. But then one of the important ways of asatsang is reading so many books of other sampradayas, or even within Gaudiya circles, so many other acharyas and so on and so forth. So therefore, and then people get influenced and the leave ISKCON. So therefore, one must be very careful what books they're reading and what lectures they're hearing, as we have mentioned many times in our discussions before. So it may appear as if people are speaking on Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and it's a fact, many of our ISKCON devotees go and listen, especially in Vrindavan, thinking that, oh, it is Bhagavad Gita, it's same Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, so what's the point? What's wrong in hearing? We will get some additional points to preach and things like that. But because of this hearing, so many devotees left ISKCON because of this wrong hearing and wrong reading. So as we know, Prabhupada very often repeated the example of Sanatana Goswami, and that is, milk touched by the lips of a serpent will become poisonous. So it appears it's the same milk, but then after one drinks, one experiences the poisonous effects. So similarly, it appears like milk. Similarly, it appears like, oh, it's same Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, but because it's contaminated by wrong philosophical understanding, especially Mayavad, most spiritual organizations in India are contaminated by Mayavad. One must be extremely careful. It may appear as if they are Vaishnavas and same Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, but most spiritual organizations in India are contaminated by Mayavad, some way or the other. So one should be extremely careful. And so therefore we have enough of good association within ISKCON. There are so many wonderful Vaishnavas within ISKCON giving lectures and seminars and so many things. So one should take advantage of this association and not unnecessarily get contaminated by other association. Otherwise, this is what happens. By one's mental concoctions, one falls down. That's what happens. Okay, so on the same point of association, this is another purport. Please read.
Ravikant Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. One who is actually serious about advancing in devotional service should desire only to satisfy the previous acharyas. I Chaya Gosani Mohitar Das. One should always think of oneself as a servant of the acharyas. And thinking this, one should live in the society of Vaishnavas. Madhya Leela 13.80. However, if one thinks that he has become very mature and can live separate from the association of Vaishnavas and thus give up all the regulative principles due to the offending a Vaishnava, one's positions becomes very dangerous. Offenses against the holy name are explained in Adi Leela, chapter 8, verse 24. Giving up the regulative principles and living according to one's whims is compared to a mad elephant, which by force uproots the Bhakti Lata and breaks it to pieces. In this way, the Bhakti Lata shrivels up. Such an offense is especially created when one disobeys the instruction of the spiritual master. This is called Guru Avagya. The devotee must therefore be very careful not to commit offenses against the spiritual master by disobeying his instructions. As soon as one is deviated from the instruction of the spiritual master, the uprooting of the Bhakti Lata begins, and gradually all the leaves dries up.
Okay, so I think so we discussed these points, but here again, Prabhupada is emphasizing that one should always think oneself as servant of the Acharyas, and thinking this one should live in the society of Vaishnavas. Again, Prabhupada used the same term. He thinks he has become very mature. So the so-called mature devotee. Then he lives separate from the association, and then he gives up all the regular principles. He offends Vaishnavas, he offends the spiritual master, and that's how the Bhakti Lata becomes dried up. Okay, read this.
By the grace of the spiritual master and Krishna, one nourishes the Bhakti Lata by regularly sprinkling it with the water of Shravan Kirtan, hearing and chanting. In this way, the seed of the Bhakti Lata sprouts and grows up and up through the whole universe until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and reaches the spiritual world. The Bhakti Lata continues to grow until it reaches the topmost planetary system, Golok Vrindavan, where Krishna lives. There the creeper takes shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, and that is its final destination. At that time, the creeper begins to grow the fruits of ecstatic love of God. It is the duty of the devotee who nourishes the creeper to be very careful. It is said that the watering of the creeper must continue. Ihan mali seche nitya shravanadi jala. It is not that at a certain stage one can stop chanting and hearing and become a mature devotee. If one stops, one certainly falls down from devotional service. Although one may be very much exalted in devotional service, he should not give up the watering process of Shravana Kirtan. If one gives up that process, it is due to an offense.
Yes. So here Prabhupada is emphasizing that how the watering process must continue. It's not that at a certain stage one can stop chanting and hearing, become a mature devotee. Again and again, you can see Prabhupada making that same point. One imagines oneself to be mature, then he gives up the hearing and chanting. And then if one stops, one certainly falls down from devotional service. And this could be due to an offense, that one loses the taste for hearing and chanting, and then one gives up the hearing and chanting, and then one falls down. And then it says, although one may be very much exalted in devotional service, he should not give up the watering process. So these are all very important instructions which Srila Prabhupada is giving for the protection of our Bhakti Lata. And so all this is possible in the association of devotees. Okay, fine. So we will read the next points: not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. So we don't have time to discuss it, but we will just read from Prabhupada's book. So somebody can just read.
Vrinda.
Another stricture is that a person may have many disciples, but he should not act in such a way that he will be obliged to any of them for some particular action or some favor. And one should also not be very enthusiastic about constructing new temples, nor should one be enthusiastic about reading various types of books, save and accept the ones which lead to the advancement of devotional service. Practically, if one very carefully reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and this nectar of devotion, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of Krishna consciousness, one need not take the trouble of reading other books. In 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, verse 8, Narad Muni, while discussing with Maharaja Yudhishthira the various functions of the different orders in society, especially mentions rules for the sannyasis, those persons who have renounced this material world. One who has accepted the sannyasa order of the life is forbidden to accept as a disciple. Anyone who is not fit, a sannyasi should first of all examine whether a prospective student is sincerely seeing Krishna consciousness. If he is not, he should not be accepted. However, Lord Chaitanya's causeless mercy is such that he advised all bona fide spiritual masters to speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. Therefore, in the line of the Lord Chaitanya, even the sannyasis can speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. And if someone is seriously inclined to become a disciple, then sannyasis always accept him. The one point is that without increasing the number of disciples, there is no propagation of the cult of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sometimes, even at a risk, a sannyasi in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. However, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. Similarly, a bona fide spiritual master has no business reading many books simply to show his proficiency or to get popularity by lecturing in different places. One should avoid all these things. It is also stated that a sannyasi should not be enthusiastic about constructing temples. We can see in the lives of various acharyas in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that they are not very enthusiastic about constructing temples. However, if somebody comes forward to offer some service, the same reluctant acharyas will encourage the building of costly temples by such servitors. For example, Rup Goswami was offered a favor by Maharaj Manasingh, the commander-in-chief of the Emperor Akbar, and Rup Goswami instructed him to construct a large temple for Govindaji, which cost various amounts of money. So, a bona fide spiritual master should not personally take any responsibility for constructing temples, but if someone has money and wants to spend in the service of Krishna, an acharya like Rup Goswami may utilize the devotee's money to construct a nice, costly temple for the service of the Lord. Unfortunately, it happens that someone who is not fit to become a spiritual master may approach wealthy person to contribute for temple construction. If such money is utilized by unqualified spiritual master for living comfortably in costly temples without actually doing any preaching work, this is not acceptable. In other words, a spiritual master needn't be very enthusiastic for constructing temple buildings simply in the name of so-called spiritual advancement. Rather, his first and foremost activity should be to preach. In this connection, Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Goswami Maharaj recommended that a spiritual master print books. If one has money, instead of constructing costly temples, one should spend his money for the publication of authorized books in different languages for propagating the Krishna consciousness movement.
Okay, thank you. So just on that point of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instructions to our Srila Prabhupada, so we'll just read this passage from the Leelamrit. So somebody can read from the screen.
Abhayanand Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Agun Javalbi. There will be fire one day. There would be fire in the Calcutta Gaudiya Mutt, and that fire of party interests would spread and destroy. When we were living in a rented house, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely at Ultadanga. We were happier then, but since we have been given this marble palace in Bagbajar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Abhay felt that this spiritual master speaking to him in urgency. as if asking him for help or warning him to avoid disaster. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then said directly to Abhay, "Ama icha chila kichu nahi, kichu bhai karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books." Standing by Radha Kund and beholding his spiritual master, Abhay felt the words deeply enter in his own life. If you ever get money, print books.
Yes, so that was Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's instructions to Sri Prabhupada. Okay, fine. So that's so we will of course discuss on these points a little more tomorrow. And but just to the important point in all these three things, whether it is not accepting unfit disciples or constructing many temples or reading many books, the most important underlying principle here is that, as Prabhupada is explaining, that these should not be done with a wrong motive. That's the important point. So as Prabhupada is explaining that, yes, disciples can be increased, there's no problem, but then not with the wrong motive for some money or some other privileges or just to increase the number for some prestige or false honor. So the wrong motive is what is being condemned. Similarly, the reading of books simply to make a big show, getting more popular, or similarly temples just to relax and not preach. So the wrong motive is what is being condemned in all these three cases. Okay. Now, chapter 8 is basically a list of offenses to be avoided. Okay, so basically there are seva prads against the deity and nama prads, which we're well aware of. So my request is, so you can go through this chapter, the list of offenses. And so if you have questions on any of these offenses, then you can ask tomorrow. Okay, fine. So maybe a little more we'll discuss on these points. Actually, there's nothing much more, but so basically, we will take some questions on these discussions tomorrow, and then we will continue. Okay, fine. Okay, so we'll stop at this point and continue tomorrow. All right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you all very much for your kind attention.
Prabhuji, what about we discussed yesterday, right? What about
okay, so you ask them?
So because we missed 2 days in between, and then Prabhuji also has a schedule next week. So we were thinking, are devotees okay with having a class on Sunday?
No, I'm okay. See, as far as I'm concerned, I'm okay with missing the Sunday and then having on Monday, Tuesday. I'm okay, but you could just ask them.
Okay, I'm just launching a poll. You can put in your feedback over there. Only 21 devotees have filled in, requesting all the others also to fill in, please.
What is the problem?
Okay, only 21 have filled in.
I think it is going 50-50% pro. Like I think we can have Sunday off only.
Okay, fine, no problem, no problem. We'll have Sunday off, and then we'll continue on Monday and Tuesday then. All right?
Yeah. Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, fine. Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami
Danda
ki
Pranam Maharaj.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam.
Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.